21st Century team. My name is Ellis Holman. My installation code is IBM, and I am the session chair. A few administrative notes before we get started. This is a voting chair. First question is, do we have any candidates in the room? No. If you are the installation rep or you are standing in for the installation rep, please remember to vote on Wednesday. It is both important to share as a whole and to your installation and in your best interest. Also, please do your session evaluations. They're important to us to be able to provide you with better sessions. It's also important to our speakers so that they can provide you with the best product possible. So today we have with us Dr. Bill Cross and Sandra Beck. Bill has a number of varied and wide experiences across the breadth of IT.
Yeah, there's that.
As does Sandra. Sandra is currently the Executive Director of ITS Florida, which is a cooperative, I believe,
Yes.
for education and the betterment of IT. Professor Cross is obviously a professor at the St. Petersburg College. So combined, we probably have 150 years of experience here.
Or
At least.
something like that, yes.
Okay, so that, we will turn it over to you two.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today.
Good morning.
So we have our title here, and by definition, a 21st century team is diverse. It's more than just putting together a team. It's the key to building team, an efficient team, is diversity and communication. Diversity is there. It's not always easy, but communication is hard.
And this kind of illustrates the communication conundrum, if you
It's
will.
okay with the I'm crazy about baseball. Will you stand still? Pick up your hat. Go pick up your hat. Okay. Now look. Then you'll go and peddle your popcorn and don't interrupt the act anymore? Yes, sir. All right. But you know, strange as it may seem, they give ball players nowadays very peculiar names.
Funny names?
Nicknames, pet names.
Not as funny as my name, Sebastian Dinwiddie.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Funnier than that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
You know the fellas' names?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
The fellow playing first base for St. Louis.
Who?
The guy on first base.
Who is on first?
Well, what are you asking me for?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, who is on first?
I'm asking you who's on first.
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Yes.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
Who?
The guy on first.
Who?
The first baseman.
Who is on first?
Have you got a first baseman on first?
Certainly.
Then who's playing first?
Absolutely.
When you pay off the first baseman every month, who gets the money?
Every dollar of it. And why not? The man's entitled to it.
Who is?
Yes.
So who gets it?
Why shouldn't he? Sometimes his wife comes down and collects it.
Whose wife?
Yes. After all, the man earns it.
Who does?
Absolutely.
Well, all I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base?
Oh, no. What is on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Well, don't change the players.
I'm not changing nobody.
Take it easy.
What's the guy's name on first base?
What's the guy's name on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know.
He's on third. We're not talking about him.
How did I get on third base?
You mention his name.
If I mention a third baseman's name, who did I say's playing third?
No, who's playing first?
Stay off of first, will you?
Well, what do you want me to do?
Now, what's the guy's name on third base?
What's on second?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know.
He's on third.
There I go, back on third again.
Well, I can't change their names.
Will you please stay on third base, Mr. Broadhurst?
Now, what is it you want to know?
What is the fella's name on third base?
What is the fella's name on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know. Third base. You got an outfield?
Oh, sure.
St. Louis has got a good outfield?
Absolutely.
The left fielder's name?
Why?
I don't know. I just thought I'd ask you.
Well, I just thought I'd tell you.
Then tell me who's playing left field.
Who is playing first?
Stay out of the infield.
Don't mention any names out here.
I want to know what's the fella's name in left field.
What is on second?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who is on first?
I don't know. Third base.
Oh, take it easy. Take it easy, man.
Communication is not always easy. In a group situation, in a team situation, it's really important that everybody gets the same message. But the number of people with whom you need to communicate is a critical factor. The more people that have to get the same message, the less effective your communication is. You can use this formula, if you will, to do that, where the number of interactions is equal to the number of people times that number minus 1, all that divided by 2. Or if you don't want to play with the math because it's 10-ish in the morning, we can illustrate. If you've got one person, you, communication is usually fairly easy, right? At least I think I understand what it is I'm trying to do or think. When you get two people, you have one communications link or one interface. That ought to be easy to maintain one communications interface, right? Just one of them, just one other person. Now, before you jump into that answer that I led you to, you got a significant other? And if you have a significant other, tell me how easy that one communications interface is to maintain. If you add a third person, you now have 3 interfaces to maintain. And a fourth person, you have 6, and it goes up geometrically from there. The more people you've got, the more difficult the communication problem might be. Does that make sense? And then you combine those problems with just normal person-to-person communication with cultural diversity.
So words have different meanings. You know that. I have a few to illustrate. Back in the 60s and 70s, Chevrolet came out with a car called Nova. It sold extremely well in the United States, so they decided to take that car into the Latin America countries. Sales were horrible if they sold anything. In Spanish, what does Nova mean? It means no go. So nobody's buying a car that doesn't go. We have some other illustrations of some easy words that are misinterpreted. In the UK, a boot is a trunk. In the United States, we wear boots. And another illustration is a bonnet. In the UK, a bonnet is the hood. Here, it's something we wear on our head.
You do.
We also have taboo topics, things that we're taught from a very young age to avoid. Spiritual, social issues. Unless you're very good friends with somebody, you avoid that, as well as those political issues. Today's world, we try to avoid those. We have cultural issues. Someone in this room told me earlier this week that in Japan or Japanese, they present their business card in this way. We just kind of hand over our business cards. So from a cultural standpoint, that's rude in Japanese. So we need to look at our conflict management styles.
In the Netherlands, as an example, if people disagree, it's often at full volume. And they shout at each other like perhaps they're going to kill each other. In Japan, that would not go over very well because that's not polite to shout in someone's face.
And our personal space as well. In some countries, being up close and personal is acceptable. I like to have my personal space when talking with someone.
Mm-hmm. So you get all of those cultural differences, if you will, And then you add another issue that one has to deal with to do communication. Can you see that? Intergenerational communication isn't necessarily easy. We currently have 5 generations working actively in the workplace. The first of them, and by the way, these ranges, these date ranges are approximations. There's no absolute agreement on what each of these generations is as far as start and end dates. So we've got the veterans who, there are still some of us around in the workplace. Then the baby boomers. And there's lots of baby boomers still in the workplace.
We have Gen X, and then we have Gen Y, Millennials.
And by the way, all of us have a whole different set of experiences and foundations. Things that we remember vividly from the time when we grew up. Our communication styles, therefore, are somewhat different. The veterans really prefer formal communication, memos, face-to-face conversations, phone calls. The baby boomers still like personal contact, but they're more comfortable with email, and they'll use voicemail more readily than the veterans.
Gen X came in with instant messaging and email. They want instant communication. Gen Y, smartphones, texting. My daughter falls in between the Gen Y and the millennial, and if I want to talk to her on the phone, I have to text her to say, call me. And then I may get a telephone call. And the millennials, again, depend on their smartphones, texting, and social media.
But interesting, the millennials don't often use their smartphones to talk to people. They use their smartphones to text people and to contact them via social media apps, but they rarely make phone calls. And then the millennials have another issue with which we're all trying to deal.
We have the helicopter parent. Both Bill and I are professors at different colleges, and we have to deal with the parents. We believe that some of this started with everybody needs to have an award. They need to have that award. And then they also have the parent going in there and fighting for them at a very young age, and this just continues through the college.
Mm-hmm. You know, the whole everybody gets a trophy in Little League for participation. And I know some of you remember you got a trophy if you won. Now everybody has to have one. And the parents, you give a student a D or an F, and it's a millennial or younger, you can almost expect mom within a couple of days wanting to know why her perfect child got a D or an F. That's not just academics, by the way. We've had parents come into the workplace because their child felt uncomfortable or their child was disciplined or picked something. And here's mom at HR complaining about the horrible boss this kid has. It's a real issue. You've seen that we're different in communication styles, we're different in other areas, and we're not going to give you a laundry list of how each of those generations is different in minute detail from the others, but we thought it was useful to come up with a list just contrasting the boomers with the millennials. So typical boomers aren't tattooed. Now, if you were in the military, especially perhaps in the Navy or the Marines, you probably, and a guy, you probably had a tattoo from somewhere. But most of us don't. We tend to like working. Don't always like our jobs, but a lot of us are planning to extend our careers beyond what is, quote, normal retirement. We don't think we're going to die anytime soon. And we have plans for something like 24 years as a typical average for this kind of group of activity after retirement.
On the other side,
Finish this.
oh, okay.
We're tech savvy. Lots of us have smartphones. There's almost as many baby boomers that have smartphones as there are millennials that have smartphones. Most of us have home PCs or laptops. Most of us have some kind of a tablet. We don't use them the same way the younger folks do, but we've got the toys.
My turn now?
Now it's your turn.
Okay. I'm in a hurry. The millennials are not. They take a little bit longer. They don't want to drive as early. I remember before I could even get a driver's license, I was taking the car from the driveway onto the front lawn, and I volunteered to wash the car because that way I could drive it onto the lawn and drive it back onto the driveway. They don't have that need because some of them have mom taking them from place to place.
And they have Uber.
So they're not in a hurry. They don't get married as young as some of us did. They want more than dollars. And they'd be happier with a career that paid them $40,000 a year than $100,000 a year with a career that they hated. So they'll make those changes. They're freer thinkers. And they're falling behind. They're falling behind in retirement, in math, in reading, in literacy. In the state of Florida, we no longer can require them to take developmental reading or developmental math. That has to be their option to do that. So then when they get into some of those classes that require those math skills, they don't have them. Some of our students can't read.
Yeah.
And they're going to college.
I've had students in business analytics that can't do math. And you know how well they do? You can't do business analytics unless you understand some math. It just doesn't make sense. But mom wants them to do that. And then we've got right around the corner
Generation Z. And there's not a lot of information about Generation Z yet. We know right now that they're less focused, but they're better multitaskers. And I was always taught that multitasking wasn't the best thing. You needed to concentrate on getting something done at a time so that you put your full effort into that. They like bargains. I like bargains too, but they seem to like that.
They care more about price than the millennials because part of their experience set is the recession that we just came through. And that's bright and fresh in their minds, so they're a little more worried about how much things cost.
And I'm going to pick on my daughter again because she likes to travel. And so she's picked a career where she has that flexibility to travel. She'll work real hard and put in a lot of hours during specific times so that she can take off time to go to Europe, use Airbnb, but she always looks for the best airfares, and instead of staying at expensive hotels, she'll find a great Airbnb house to stay in. And then Gen Z is full of early starters. So we have them getting started early in school, but they don't necessarily go on to college.
Now, lots of them are going out and working instead of going to college, and it's kind of a reverse of the trend that we'd seen for years and years. Lots of them are going out to learn to be electricians and plumbers, and by the way, programmers. Instead of going to college, they're doing that and going to work. They've got, they tend to be more entrepreneurial as a generation. Lots of Gen Zers are talking about and starting companies. And part of the thing that helps that is this whole high-tech environment in which we find ourselves. There are some real opportunities to start businesses that make money. And I saw something on the news the other day. There's a 6-year-old who happens to be in the Tampa area who's making something like $2 million a year as a YouTube toy evaluator. I'm not sure how much of it's the 6-year-old, by the way, and how much of it's the parents, but the kid is the star, and the kid is making all this money by being a YouTube presence. Gen Z has higher expectations than the millennials. They are big on individuality. 96% of the Gen Z people have social media profiles. And not just one, that's a plural. And they're more global. They see nothing of that's unusual about crossing international lines to do something they feel like doing. Even more so than the millennials. Big differences. And I think that kind of sums up the differences in some of the generations. And by the way, the communications issues that come from those differences, because that simple symbol means something different to each of those people.
So when teaching a class, I have to say number, #, hashtag, because in my classes, I have all those diverse age groups.
Mm-hmm. So with diverse communication, you need to match the formality of the communication to the culture in which the communication is taking place. You also should use multiple communication avenues. Yes, you may be more comfortable with an email, but if half the people that work for you are comfortable with texts, why not send one of those too? Individualize your approach. If you're talking to a baby boomer, maybe you use the communications types that they're more comfortable with. If you're communicating with a millennial, use the type they're more familiar with. And by the way, most of us have bosses who happen to be boomers. And boomers don't text. Yeah, they do, but that's not their primary communications methodology. You want to get their attention? Send them a memo. Maybe an email. And by the way, watch your spelling and your capital letters. And that may sound stupid, but you get something in all lowercase with lousy grammar and very poor spelling, and you look at that, and the first reaction from somebody like me is, why can't they even do the simple stuff? By the time you get past that, why can't they even do the simple stuff, the impact of the message has been diluted. Does that make sense? Understand the differences in values between the different generations, between the different cultures. And be aware of the motivating factors of the people with whom you're communicating. It's not illegal to use that knowledge to get someone to do the things you think you would like them to do. It's smart. This one's yours.
So ask, don't assume. You need to clarify things. Be willing to learn. You can learn from any generation. Everybody has something to contribute to that. Learn social media, even if it's just to go out there and create a page and communicate a little bit with someone on social media. Know what they're doing. Be willing to teach, because they need to learn as well, and they want to learn. Acknowledge the differences. We all know that there's differences. And don't take it personally. Sometimes it feels very personal when you're not communicating well with one another, but it's real. And just don't let that color your decision between each other.
So now you've got all of these age groups, all of these cultural differences that make your team building a little more difficult and the communication a little more difficult. Now let's add the big one. Gender. And in case you hadn't heard yet, men and women are different.
And there's a list up there. And the first one is obvious. We're different physically, but we're also different mentally, emotionally, how we solve problems. It's not wrong how we solve problems, it's different how we get to that end. And we communicate differently.
My apologies to Prince. I stole his clip and changed a word, but it sort of fits. And we spend most of our lives in some kind of a tension between men and women. It's not wrong, it's just natural. But need to understand that in today's world, teams are diverse, and you're going to have male and female team members, and that means you need to be able to consolidate and bring those groups together.
So did you ever wonder why I prefer spa days?
And I'd rather play or watch football?
I like talk, girl talk, boy talk. I like all kinds of talk.
On and on and on. I'd rather go hunting or fishing or something like that. You don't talk much when you're hunting, but we always have a good time.
I like shopping, and I could spend a day shopping. There are days that I want to shop, and there's days I don't want to shop, but when I do want to shop, I can spend a whole day out there looking.
And you know, I'd rather go to a nice watering hole, have something to eat, and probably watch a game on TV.
I like fuchsia.
What's fuchsia? We're different. We're very different.
Are you able to see the words on that?
And the reason for asking, by the way, is because it kind of washes out in the light up here in the front, so. It doesn't mean that we can't adapt and learn to communicate with the people of the other sex. We're different physically.
So we're going to talk a little bit about why we're different physically. We have the same hormones. Men and women have the same hormones. What we have is different levels of hormones. So testosterone, men have 20 times greater of that hormone. And that leads toward aggression and competition. Whereas women have more estrogen and progesterone, which leads toward tending and nurturing. That's why we're mothers. That's why we're able to take care of children.
Our brains are physically different.
So here's a PET scan. Men and women, the color doesn't matter other than it shows the different areas of the brain that when it was a UCLA study, both were deprived of food for 24 hours and then presented with a hot fudge sundae.
Note the differences.
This is the chemical reaction and the differences in the brain between men and women.
Yeah. And this is a bunch of people. There's 1,000 people, and these are representative scans picked from that 1,000 people. But it's fascinating to note that virtually every person reacted in the scan based on their gender. We're different in a lot of ways in our brains, physically different. As an example, the amygdala, which is the center for emotion and aggression, is much larger in men than in women. That seems a little strange because men aren't so emotional. But the difference is that the neural pathways in the corpus callosum, which are the pathways from one part of the brain to the other, are much larger in females than they are in males. The hippocampus in females is bigger, and that's where emotions are stored and processed. Guess what? Guys feel the emotion. They feel it perhaps equally as strongly as the women do. But we don't have the neural pathways to process it further than that, so it's dropped. Where she experiences what's going on and the emotion and wraps it all up together and stores it in another part of the brain because she does have those connections, and that makes a big difference. And one of the results of all of that is this. Sandra will tell me, you remember when we went to such and such a place, and the server wore white shoes and this kind of dress, and we had this for lunch or dinner, and on and on and on. And my general reaction is typically, yeah, I think I remember going there. But she got all the detail. And that's kind of why. We are different mentally. Our brain chemicals are different. And again, we all have the same brain chemicals, just different levels. And males have much more vasopressin, which is associated with territoriality and hierarchy and competition and things like that. Women have more oxytocin, more serotonin, which are involved in nurturing and verbal emotive connection and stress reduction. These PET scans, again, show the difference between men and women. This is the brain reaction of 2 women and 2 men to a highly emotional movie. Note the different location of where the activity is. And I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of medical detail about why all that is the case, but notice that we process those things in a different part of the brain. Men do spatial relationship stuff better typically than women. Women are much better at verbal analysis and verbal expression and verbal problems than we.
So we communicate differently. Women talk about their feelings. They talk to resolve problems. If I'm talking to Dr. Bill about a problem, I don't want him to solve my problem. I just want him to listen to that problem.
Do you hear that, guys? That's really important stuff. If somebody in your world, female in your world, talks about a problem, it might be useful to ask, do you want me to do something about it, or do you want me to listen? Because it may well be all she wants you to do is listen.
I want to talk about my feelings. I talk to bond with individuals in the workplace or in my home life. Bonding is very important, and we'll see that as we go forward, that we want to build that rapport. Mm-hmm. We want to feel good. It makes us feel good to talk. And we like talking about people, and it's not just talking about girl stuff or boy stuff. It's about things in the world.
Men talk more about what we would call practical matters, our new computer operating system update, the specs on the car you just bought or are looking at, the stats for the football team you follow, practical matters, right? We talk about things more than we talk about people. We talk about sports, we tell jokes, and yes, we do talk about women. But men would prefer to act than to talk. Women talk.
There's actually research out there. They've identified a language protein in the brain called FOXP2, and it's called the chattier portion, and that's females have this FOXXP2. Mm-hmm. We talk about 20,000 words a day versus men talking about 7,000 words a day. So there's actually scientific proof of why we talk more than men.
You don't know how happy she was when we found that stat, by the way. Mark Gungor, who is well known in this arena, presents a lot of these issues quite well, and so we threw this in because it says things very well.
We're going to start discussing men's brains, women's brains, and how they're very different from each other. Now, I want to start with men's brains. All right, now men's brains are very unique. Men's brains are made up of little boxes. And we have a box for everything. We've got a box for the car. We've got a box for the money. We've got a box for the job. We've got a box for you. We've got a box for the kids. We've got a box for your mother somewhere in the basement. We got boxes everywhere. And the rule is the boxes don't touch. When a man discusses a particular subject, we go to that particular box, we pull that box out, we open the box, we discuss only what is in that box. All right? And then we close the box and put it away, being very, very careful not to touch any other boxes. Now, women's brains are very, very different from men's brains. Women's brains are made up of a big ball of wire. And everything is connected to everything. The money's connected to the car, and the car's connected to your job, and your kids are connected to your mother, and everything's connected to everything. And it's like... It's like the internet superhighway, okay? And it's all driven by energy that we call emotion. And it's one of the reasons why women tend to remember everything. Because if you take an event and you connect it to an emotion, it burns in your memory and you can remember it forever. The same thing happens for men. It just doesn't happen very often because, quite frankly, we don't care. Women tend to care about everything. And she just loves it. Okay? Now, men, we have a box in our brain that most women are not aware of. This particular box has nothing in it. In fact, we call it the nothing box. And of all the boxes a man has in his brain, the nothing box is our favorite box. If a man has a chance, he'll go to his nothing box every time. That's why a man can do something seemingly completely brain dead for hours on end. You know, like fishing. Now, they've actually measured this. The University of Pennsylvania a couple of years ago did a study and discovered that men have the ability to think about absolutely nothing and still breathe. You know, they connected all the wires and stuff like that and watched their brain activity, and then all of a sudden, I think he's dead. Huh? You know, women can't do it. They can't do it. Their minds never stop. And they don't understand the nothing box. And it drives them crazy. Because nothing drives a woman more crazy or makes her feel more irritated than to witness a man doing nothing.
So this is a humorous video, but from a female standpoint, I can tell you that I juggle everything out here. I wish I had that nothing box where I could go to every once in a while just to get a little peace. Mm-hmm. Because of these differences, we need to develop diverse approaches of dealing with it. So women, we tend to nurture. That's just in our DNA.
And it's a really strong impetus to nurture. I think this illustration is better than anything the two of us could say.
Well, all day long we're celebrating Mom, and we all know mother's love knows no bounds. But as CBS 2's other Steve Hartman shows us tonight, it also apparently knows no species.
You can understand why some visitors to the Burlington, Iowa Humane Society get a little freaked out. It's not every day you see a dog have a kitten for lunch.
Grab him, grab the little kitty.
And not just a kitten. This dog is about to have a whole litter of kittens for lunch.
Uh-oh.
The story of this unusual dining arrangement began a couple months ago. Lily, a mix of lab and who knows what, was found along an old farm road. She was pregnant and soon had 6 puppies who all got adopted. And everything was fine. Until the kittens showed up without a mother.
And we didn't know what to do. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to bottle feed all these kitties.
Teresa Kurth works for the shelter and helped come up with a solution.
You know, there's a big difference between a dog and a cat.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So we thought, let's just try.
Try and see if Lily would have the kittens for lunch, which she did. Breakfast and dinner, too.
To see this dog just take to these baby kitties instantly, I just think Lily's one of a kind.
Yes and no. There was also the cat who heard an abandoned fawn crying for food and took in the little deerlet. Or how about the baby horse raised by a goat? And perhaps most amazing of all, the leopard, who in killing a baboon unwittingly created an orphan. The leopard could have easily made the baby an appetizer, but instead sat down beside and mothered it. Why would an animal show such grace? Why would Lily, when one of the kittens fell into her water dish, rescue the little troublemaker and carry him off to safety? Why? Other than the obvious.
I mean, it's what she does.
Indeed, for most mothers, it's just what they do. An instinct so deeply wired into them that often all they know is to love and care for life. Understanding it completely will take scientists many more years. But feel free to appreciate it this weekend.
Wow, that's deep.
So in addition to nurturing, we teach. We teach our children. We try to teach our husbands. But that's part of our makeup, is we teach. We also discipline. And we discipline by telling our children that do this or you'll be in trouble with me, which is different from how men do things.
Yeah, dads also teach their children. We teach our children differently. We teach our children with rough and tumble play, if you will, and moms don't do that very often. We teach our children somewhat different lessons than mom does. We also nurture our kids. And there's some fascinating research where they took a group of second graders in several schools and evaluated the second graders' relationship with the parents, especially with the fathers. And those kids that had a stronger relationship with their fathers did much better in third grade subject matter. Very interesting results. So dads also nurture, but in a different way. And we discipline, typically differently. It's not uncommon for dad to say, if you don't act this way, you won't have any friends. If you do this stuff, you'll never get a job. Mom almost never says something like that. Men tend to thrive on competing and achieving.
I would prefer to thrive on harmony and relating to others.
Men talk to give information primarily or to report.
I would rather collect information and build that rapport by collecting that information.
So we've spent a bunch of time talking about differences and that sort of thing. Let's try and wrap that up into some recommendations to improve the communication and working together by gender.
When we disagree, it affects everything. Remember I talked earlier about having everything out there in front of me? That doesn't go away if I'm having a disagreement. It stays out there.
And men can partition things. In other words, take a disagreement, put it in its little box, put it away till it's important again, and go on to do other things.
Getting things done, I want to build that relationship first. I want to know things before I actually get started with things. I need that background.
And I just soon get started. We'll build a relationship as we get the thing done.
This one is really important. In meetings, women tend to nod just to show that they're listening. Doesn't mean I'm agreeing, it just means that I'm listening.
And men tend to nod when they agree. You know, can you see how big a problem that is if you're leading a meeting and you're watching the people out there and you're trying to get the team together to do something, and the women are out there nodding and the guys are nodding once in a while as well. And you can walk away figuring, okay, well, everybody's on board because everybody's nodding.
On the other hand,
she's not.
On the other hand, if I'm looking out there and the guys aren't nodding, then I think you're not even bothering to listen to me. So we need to come to some...
Yeah, being aware of that really helps. We kind of speak different languages, and it's useful to maybe figure out how to cross those lines. If women are talking to men, it's useful for them to remember that it would help to use the voicemail. Use report speak. Skip to the bottom line quickly, because that's what he's interested in doing. Resist the context. He doesn't want to hear all of the reasoning behind it. Hopefully, he'll ask if he needs more detail. Avoid hint language. You all know what hint language is?
I haven't been to a movie in a long time.
Yeah, you know, I think that's right.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
Now, she wants to go to the movie, but she's not saying that, right? Here's an example of hint language. I will not read it to you. Instead of hint language, women might think about using the words I want, I need. I want to go to the movie. I need to go to some store with you. Does that make sense? Because guys can sometimes get that. We can be kind of dense. But you know, if she says, I want to do this, it's a little different than, you know, we haven't done this in a while. Encourage questions. because you skip to the bottom line as a woman, maybe it's worth talking to him and saying, you got any questions? And don't communicate when upset. Remember, we talked about that several times throughout here. A woman being upset colors everything. Well, if she's upset about something that really doesn't have anything to do with him, she doesn't want to be upset with him when she's trying to get him on her side.
So, this is what we need to do. We need to use the voice female. Men need to use that to talk to us. You need to have more detail. Provide that background. I like that. I like to know where we've been and where we're going. Use rapport speak. Say hi. Get to know me a little bit. Provide the ability for more questions. Move a little bit slower to the bottom line. You want your team to work together well, so changing roles a little bit will help that. Real important is eye contact. She's watching you. Eye contact is very important, so you need to also have that eye contact. Admire her talents, not her attributes. She'll notice. And watch your nonverbal emphasis. She is great at reading body language. And in summary,
men are from Earth, women are from Earth. Deal with it and use the tools that you have to build your team. We'd appreciate an evaluation. The QR code is there. It's also on the handout. And we thank you for your attention.
does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
How do you decide to go to dinner?
It's a toss-up. It's a compromise.
Mm-hmm. It is. And some of it depends on what you both like. And you can discuss it. And again, you can use these techniques to discuss that with her.
So what is I don't know, I don't care?
It means she wants suggestions. Make suggestions.
How many?
I've
It's a crystal ball here. We'll
It
just
does.
ask the crystal
It
ball.
does. Anybody else? Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
So when do you think that will end? Will it be some kind of historical thing you'll cross at the end? I mean, like all the other previous ones have time date or, beginning and end.
I'm guessing there will be some technological milestone or maybe a societal milestone that will cause it. We don't know what that might be, but that it will cause that demarcation. It may be a recession. Thanks.
Thank you very much.